Okay, let's start. Thank you so much for coming today, and also thank you for all those who are watching online. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation in which I'm going to cover all the tool belt of developer tools that we have available in Salesforce, having a section which is going to be especially dedicated to AI-powered developer tools. This is the forward-looking statement slide that I need to include because I work for Salesforce. It only means that you should make purchasing decisions based on the features that are commercially available. And with that, let me introduce myself. My name is Alba Rivas. I am a developer advocate at Salesforce. And here you have my contact details, but don't worry about taking pictures or anything, because at the end of the presentation, I will share a Google Doc with my contact details and a compilation of resources for all the tooling that we are going to take a look today. Great. So I want to start talking about productivity. Developers who know how to use modern developer tooling are much more productive than developers who don't. Not only that, but they also have a much more pleasant development experience. And that is why I wanted to have this session in which I'm going to cover all the tools that we have available so that you can become more productive. You may know some of the tools, but you may not know some others, and I hope that you learn something today. So, Developer Console, lovely tool which has been here for a long time. It's been great for some years, but we are not updating it anymore. We are not fixing the bugs that the Developer Console has, and an end of life hasn't been announced, but I think it will happen at some moment. So my recommendation is don't use the Developer Console anymore, because we have two Salesforce IDs that are much more efficient and that are going to give you a much more pleasant developer experience. So what's the modern way to develop applications in Salesforce? Well, you have your org. You use the Salesforce CLI to work with your org metadata and data, and then you use one of the Salesforce IDs, VS Codes or Code Builder, to build your applications locally and send your changes to your org and retrieve the changes that you create declaratively in your org. There are other IDEs that you could use, of course, but the Salesforce extensions for Visual Studio Code and for Code Builder only work in Salesforce IDEs, in those two. So today we're going to take a look at Salesforce CLI. We're going to talk about those IDEs and the extensions. We are going to then enter into a section in which we are going to talk about code quality and how we can improve it thanks to developer tools. And we're going to take a look at some code formatting tools and code analysis tools. And finally, we're going to have a section in which we will talk about code generation and API tools. So the Salesforce CLI. The Salesforce CLI has commands for doing multiple things. You can work with your org's data and metadata. You can migrate data, retrieve data, push data, metadata. You can load data, for instance, if you want to use a scratcher and you want to do your testing in that scratcher. You can also work with packages. You can run your tests. You can also calculate the coverage of those tests and many more things, right? And all that, you can do it through commands. Those commands are not only there for helping you become more productive while you develop your apps, but also to allow you to build powerful continuous integration and continuous deployment workflows. The Salesforce CLI was released in 2015, and we had a first executable, which is FSFDX. And I assume that many people here have been using that executable. But there was a point in which the product team decided that they wanted to make it a little bit more performant, and they wanted to provide also a better developer experience in the sense of the commands or the ways in which you can type the commands. And they decided to create a new executable called SF. This executable already contains all the commands that existed in the old SFDX executable, and you should all try to migrate to the executable, to the new one. There is an automatic way to do that. There is a command called sfdev convert script that you can run over your CI/CD jobs to make the automatic conversion from SFDX to SF. And by the way, the extensions at the moment are using the SFDX executable, but the team is working in changing everything so it uses the SF, the new one. And when they do that, we will need to all upgrade to using SF in our machines, because if not, the extensions won't work. And I've been told that this is going to be released like maybe in 2 weeks. So take a look at the new syntax. It's very nice. It's simpler than the previous syntax, and learn about it, because there are some changes that you will need to take into account. So something that I love of the Salesforce CLI is the way in which it's been built. Why? Because under the scenes, it is using an open source framework called Oakleaf. Then the different teams who have commands in the Salesforce CLI have contributed to it by creating plugins. Everything is modularized, as you see here. Then there are some plugins that you can optionally install depending if you are an ISV or not, or for instance for beta features that we haven't incorporated yet by default. And one nice thing is that developers can create plugins on top of them. This means that you can create your own commands and make them part of the SF executable for your very own use case. And our developer community out there have been working on many, many plugins that are available for you to use and that are super popular. Take a look at the downloads file here. And I recommend taking a look at them, because they can really help you in the implementation of your DevOps lifecycle. I'm sharing also the PDF at the end. So if you want to take a look at this later, you will be able to do it. You don't need to take a picture. Great, so that's the Salesforce CLI. And typing commands is great. I like typing commands, but sometimes it needs a lot of memory. And because of that, the team worked in creating extensions for the Salesforce IDEs that are going to help you using those commands more easily. The Salesforce IDEs are VS Code and Code Builder. They are pretty similar. VS Code is something that you install locally. You need to install the extensions, the Salesforce CLI, Git, and any libraries that you want to use yourself. And it's a little bit faster than Code Builder, because obviously it's running in your local machine and not in a remote server. But Code Builder also has some benefits. Code Builder is our web-based IDE, and one of the benefits it has is that it comes with everything installed. You just launch the instance, and it has the extensions, the Salesforce CLI, and Git. So that's great. And of course, if you are far from your machine, for instance, this is a nice alternative to VS Code to make some quick changes in your org and continue working. Code Builder is available in Professional Edition orgs, Enterprise Edition, and Unlimited Editions for free. So this is something that everyone can try out. If you don't have any of those editions, I will leave you a link in the resources to get a 30-day trial for a Sales Cloud org that I think it's Enterprise Edition, where you can launch Code Builder and play with it. The functionality that you get in both IDEs is exactly the same. The extensions provide the same functionality. You will be able to access the shortcuts for the Salesforce CLI commands. You are going to have access to the debugger. You are going to have access to the OR browser and everything else. Great. So I'm talking a lot about the extensions. The extensions are a group of extensions of libraries that we initially created for VS Code, but that are also available in Code Builder. Indeed, they come pre-installed for you, and they give you lots of capabilities. For instance, these shortcuts to be able to use the Salesforce CLI with clicks, not having to remember the commands. For instance, auto-completion and syntax highlighting capabilities. It also gives you a tool called OR browser that allows you to inspect the metadata that exists in your OR and retrieve your components from there. It also includes a test runner and a code coverage highlighter that we are going to see in a second, and also a SQL query editor. So very complete. There is a basic extension pack, and then there is an extended version of it that includes some libraries that our community created. So talking about debugging, system debug. This is not anymore the most effective way of debugging. System debug are great for specific use case, but if you want to do like general debugging of your production code or your test code, there is something else that you can use, which is much more effective and fun to use, which is the Apex Replay Debugger. There are actually two debuggers. One of them is the Apex Interactive Debugger, but I'm not going to focus on this one because this is a paid one and it's for ISVs only, and that is a real debugger. So the ISV debugger stops your code running in your OR so you can add breakpoints, variables, and inspect it. The Apex Replay Debugger is not a debugger in that way, but the experience while using it is as if it was a real debugger. Why? Because how it works is it takes your debug logs, it downloads them from your org, and then it replays them so that it can stop in the different breakpoints that you have in your code, and so that you can inspect your variables and more. It is completely free, so everyone can use it, and comes installed with the extensions. If you want to debug LWC, we don't have any specific tooling. We just recommend to use the Chrome developer tools that I'm not going to show today, but if you want to learn about that, I also have some resources in the resources list that I will share later. Okay, so let's take a look at the demo. This is Code Builder. So this is the web-based IDE that I mentioned. It is GA since a few months ago. So as you see, the experience is very similar to VS Code. And in Code Builder, if you want to take a look at the extensions, you can go here and see what's installed. By default, all the extensions in the extension pack are installed, but you can also install your personalized extensions, the ones that you want to use for your use case. This is one difference with VS Code. Instead of installing the extensions from the Visual Studio Marketplace, there is another marketplace that you need to go to, which is the OpenV6 one, because it's like a product that doesn't belong to Visual Studio Code. And yeah, and then if you want to use this to work on your project, to work with your org, the first thing that you need to do is to connect to your org. Here at the bottom, you can always see to which org you are connected to. And if you want to change the org or you want to authorize, you could launch or type the Salesforce CLI command that allows you to authorize to an OR, but it is easier if you just click on that button, because this menu is going to pop up and you're going to be able to authorize to an OR very easily. Another nice feature is that there is a button here that allows you to open the OR to which you are connected. So it's like much more effective, it's fast. What else? If I open the command palette, which in Mac is Shift-Command-P and in Windows Shift-Control-P, and I type sfdx, I see dozens of commands here available, which are mostly the commands that you can run through the Salesforce CLI, but with a declarative version that you only need to click. Or if you click on a file with the right button, you're going to find also some commands available. For instance, here we have the command to deploy this source to org. We can also configure some settings. For instance, there is one setting that will deploy every time that you save a file, which is very convenient. This command allows you to retrieve the source from your OR. And well, if you want to do that for a specific folder, a complete folder, or even your complete project, you can also right-click a folder and take a look at all the different commands that are available. There's also an option to compute the diff of your files against the files that are in your OR, another one to generate manifests, well, dozens of commands. Okay, so what else do we have here with the extensions? There is something called our browser. This is a view in which you're going to be able to inspect the metadata that exists in your OR. And if you click on this cloud button here, or this one in the whole folder, that metadata is going to be retrieved and it's going to be stored in your local copy. So it's very convenient. And for tests, we have also a view in which you can take a look at all your Apex tests and all your Lightning Web Components tests. You can debug them, you can run them like all together, and more. But instead of doing that, instead of running my test from here, we are going to try something. So you see that here I have a method which is get single account. It's very simple. This is just retrieving some data with a simple SQL query. And in the test class, I have a test, a unit test, in which we are testing for the behavior of that method. So you see here that two buttons appear. And these buttons are there exposed because I have the extensions installed. So it's very easy to run a test from here or to debug it. But we are going to do something first. You see this icon here at the bottom? That's going to enable the code coverage overlay. So let me run the test, and we are going to see the result in a second. Okay, my test passed correctly. And now I can go to my account controller class and see which lines did my last test run covered, which is very convenient. This was available in the developer console, and now it is also available in Visual Studio Code and Code Builder. You can also highlight the code coverage for LWC, and that is done by using an extension for Jest. It's not something that belongs to Salesforce. It's just an extension that you install, and it's going to compute to show you the code coverage also with green and red for your Lightning Web Components. So now we are going to try to debug this test. So by debugging this test, what is happening is that behind the scenes, we are launching the Apex Replay Debugger. This is the easiest way to launch the Apex Replay Debugger. When you want to debug what your production code is doing, I recommend writing a test and then click on the debug button. But there is another way. You can download your logs manually from the org with a command that is play debuggers. It's, well, I don't remember the command right now. It's maybe logs. Yeah, get Apex debug logs, and then you call this command, which is launch Apex replay debugger with current file. But that's more complex because you need to download the log yourself and then launch the debugger. Much easier. You launch it from your unit test. So because we clicked on debug, this started launching my Apex replay debugger. And now, see what we have here. I added some breakpoints, and it's able to stop in the breakpoints. And not only the breakpoints of my test code, but also the breakpoints that I have in my production code, in the one that my test is calling. I can continue doing that, and for instance, if you declare some variables, you can take a look at the value that those variables contain. And you can also take a look at that here on the left-hand side, and you can also create watch expression. More effective than system debug, right? Okay, yeah, so let's go back to the slides and let's continue talking about something that I love, which is code quality. So I know that many companies think that investing in code quality is loss of time and loss of resources. But I can tell you that investing in code quality is going to reduce the time and resources that you need to fix bugs in the future, like 10 times or 50 times what it costs you, okay? So I recommend everyone to spend some time thinking about how can I improve the code quality of my application, like by writing proper unit tests and by using tooling. One way in which we can easily improve the code quality is by adopting code formatting and analysis tools in our projects. So code formatting, super easy. You just need to install a library, a Node.js library, which is called Prettier. Prettier is going to format your code according to the rules that you indicate. It has some default rules, but if you want to change that because you have other code conventions with the developers of your project, you can do it. I want to use tabs or not. I want to use spaces, for instance, things like that. By default, it's going to format your JavaScript, HTML, and CSS code. And we created a plugin for formatting Apex. And we also recommend to include the XML plugin, which we didn't create, but it's helpful to format metadata files. These are the libraries that you need to include in the developer dependencies of your Node project when you are working locally in your Visual Studio Code or Code Builder environment. All our sample apps, which are in github.com/trailheadapps, use Prettier. They contain an implementation of Prettier, so you can take a look at that package.json and simply copy it because everything is set up there. So that's code formatting. What about static code analysis? Static code analysis means evaluating your JavaScript code to make sure that you are following best practices, you are not introducing vulnerabilities, and so on. There is a very famous static code analysis tool, which is called Slint, and we've created plugins so that you can use Slint to analyze your Lightning Web Components code, your Aura code, and even your Jest code. So recommended option is to include all your plugins, all these plugins, in your package.json file. And if you want to also do static code analysis over Apex, you can include PMD. PMD was created specifically for Apex, and it has a binary distribution that you can install in your machine. It also has a VS Code extension, so all these libraries, you can install the library or the executable, and optionally, you can install the VS Code extension, and the extension is going to make it easier to work with them. It's going to add like the option to launch, for instance, the scanner from a button and so on, same as the extensions for that Salesforce has. And then in your CI/CD jobs, you can call, for instance, the available GitHub actions. This would be, if you want to do everything yourself in a standalone way, like regarding code analysis, this would be the recommended setup. But we have, and you can also check the github.com Trailhead Apps repo to see how we are setting up our projects there. But there is a new tool called Salesforce Code Analyzer that does all that for you. So if you don't want to set up the libraries yourself and you prefer to just install a tool with one click and use it, then you can try out Code Analyzer. In the other way, you're going to have more flexibility because you can control the libraries and the versions that you're using, but Salesforce Code Analyzer at the end is doing almost the same as the SLint and PFD thing together, but it's easier because you just install the tool and that's it. It works for Apex and Lightning Web Components, and it has a CLI plugin. Remember Salesforce CLI plugins. It also has a VS Code extension and a GitHub action so you can include it in your CI jobs. It includes Slint, PMD, the two libraries that we saw before, but it also includes something called Salesforce Graph Engine, which improves the results, the recommendations that it gives, because it's not only doing static analysis, but also taking a look at how your classes relate to each other and using that information to give you insights and warnings, etc. And it also includes something called Retire.js, which is a library that detects vulnerable files and tells you to retire them. It is in beta. If you are an ISV, you are required at the moment to use this because the security review requires you to upload the logs that get generated with this tool. And then we have something very new that was made GA this month in February, which is called Apex Guru. Apex Guru examines your code to give you insights of how you can improve it, but it does it in a different way because it uses AI. It uses a large language model called CodeGen that Salesforce created, the Salesforce research team. And it takes a look at your code, but it also takes a look at your production execution logs. There are some things that cannot be detected with static analysis. For instance, when a query is not being selective, for instance, when a method is using more CPU time than expected, all those things can only be found out when you execute your code in production. And that is why Apex Guru, it's only available in production and full copy sandboxes because it needs to have the production log data so that it can produce results. This is part of Scale Center, and it is available on unlimited edition orgs. And at the moment, there's no way to try for developers, but we gave this feedback to the team, and they are working on creating maybe a Trailhead module or something that gives you access to a trial org so you can take a look. Great, so let me demo Apex Guru, which I have here. Okay, so you're going to find it under Scale Center. And here you can find the different reports that Apex Guru has created. I think it creates one per week, and we are taking a look at the last one. In that report, you're going to find some code recommendations. For instance, critical recommendation, major recommendations, or minor recommendations. One cool thing of Apex Guru is that they give you a lot of explanation. They tell you why this code is not being performant, and they give you a recommended fix. So it's really easy to go there, pick the fix, and use it in your code. It also does SQL DML analysis, for instance, to detect when queries are not selective. And it also helps identify expensive methods. For instance, this method is consuming at least 500% of CPU time. And Apex Guru is able to tell you that thanks to artificial intelligence, because this is the way in which it is learning from your production execution logs. And also there is a tab in which they show you the classes and methods that are not being used in your org, so you can remove them. So it's interesting. Great. And lastly, I want to talk about our code generation tool, Einstein for Developers. So this is a Visual Studio Code extension, also Code Builder extension, of course, that was released a few months ago in beta. And we've been making some improvements to it, so we continue improving it and delivering new functionality. In the initial release, what was provided was the ability to add a sidebar in Visual Studio Code where you can ask Einstein to generate code. It only works for Apex so far, but you can, of course, use it. And LWC, it's on the roadmap. Also, it was released the Code Analyzer integration. This is fully integrated with Code Analyzer. But I'm more interested in talking about the new features that it has, which are the test case generation and code autocomplete. And I'm going to show you better in a demo. One important thing is that Einstein for Developers takes into account the context. And the context is, first of all, the metadata that you are passing in your prompt. So it's always a good idea to use, for instance, developer names when you are referring to objects or to fields, especially if they are custom objects or custom fields. It's great to, in your prompt, always indicate the developer name of the custom object so that Einstein for Developer can understand that you are referring to that metadata. It takes into account the metadata definition of your org, the custom objects that you have created there, and it also takes into account the file that you have opened in the Salesforce IDE. If you are going to ask Einstein to generate code for something that you have already code for in a file, make sure to open that file when you execute the prompt, because that is the way in which we can pass the context. So let me show you how Einstein for Developers works. So here, if you want to use like the generic functionality, you can open the Einstein sidebar and you can paste here a question. Okay. This one, a prompt. For instance, I'm saying to Einstein, create a class with a method that looks for all existing accounts and calculates their average annual revenue. And if you do that, the result is a good result. You will probably have to tweak it a little bit, but doing some iterations, you also learn how to communicate with the thing. Okay? And then you can copy your code and you can also get feedback. That is what was available before. But what I wanted to show today that is very interesting is unit test generation. So for this same method, for instance, let me close this. We are going to try to generate a test with Einstein. We are going to right click, and here we have a button, Einstein generate a test. So we are going to click on there, and it's going to generate tests for me. So first thing, you saw that it was able to find the class in which I have the rest of my unit tests. This is very convenient. If it doesn't find a class, it asks you, and it tells you in which class do you want me to create the test. So it's smart. Then once you get this result, you can accept, try again, or clear. I'm going to try again because that result was not a very good one. Well, but this one is much better, so I'm going to accept it. And you will probably have to tweak it because here, for instance, it's trying to get an account that is not created, but it is because I don't know if there is a test setup class. No, we don't have a test setup class. In any case, you will have to create that account yourself, but it's a good starting point and a good approximation, and it's going to save you some time. The other thing that is new is auto-completion suggestions, auto-completion suggestions. So this is not the typical auto-completion that you get in Visual Studio Code while you are typing. Is kind of different one because the insights are generated, or the suggestions are generated with AI. So for instance, I'm going to change this method, and we are going to do something with that account. Instead of returning it directly, I'm going to, for instance, change its name to be uppercase. And then, if you wait a little bit while you are typing, let me see, some things start to appear. So this one is like very evident that this is, wow, let me do it again, that this is the next line that should be printed there, here. But in other cases, it's able to do more intelligent suggestions. If I want to accept it, I just press tab, and that's it. So very useful. Yeah, and I don't want to finish my presentation without talking about a tool that many developers are using to to test their HTTP requests towards Salesforce APIs, which is Postman. So we don't own Postman, but we have created 6 different collections of API calls that you can fork and that you can use to build your integration faster. The Salesforce Platform APIs collection, for instance, that includes collections to reach the REST API, the Connect API, the Streaming API, like all the different types of APIs that we have in the Salesforce platform. It has more than 250 requests already created, so you can go there and copy them and play with them. So it's very convenient. I took a look yesterday, and this repository, the Salesforce Platform APIs collection, has 182K forks. It's a lot. Many people are using it, and it's being very popular because it's useful. It's really useful. And I leave you all the links again in the resources. It is available as a desktop app. Also, you can access it through web, and you can install it in Visual Studio Code. So we have arrived to the end of the presentation. You have seen how important it is to know all the tools that are available, because there are really nice tools that are going to help you become a better developer. It's important to really learn how to use them, and that's why I give you a list of resources that you can use to really learn and practice. And you've seen how artificial intelligence is being every time more relevant for developers, and how those tools can make your developer life much easier. I love this meme. I don't know if you have seen it before, but I don't think that AI will replace programmers, but I do think that we need to learn AI, so we are not replaced by other programmers who learn AI for us. And with that, please take a look at their resources. Take a picture. Okay. Everyone is ready. Thank you. Okay, let me show you this for a second. The resources are here. It is a Google Doc in which I have videos, blogs, Trailhead modules, explain the different ways in which you can try out the features and so on. So please use it, and of course you can give me feedback later. Thank you very much. And please make sure to complete the survey, because for us it's super important to get feedback from you. That way I can improve my presentation next time, and that way we can craft the content for TDX better next time, because we can learn from your interests, what you enjoy, what you didn't like, etc. And I don't have time for questions, but I will take them asynchronously if you come here and talk to me. Thank you very much.